Welcome to another Bow Tie Tuesday. We're here in Tempe, Arizona. It's my pleasure to be here with Chris Morett. Chris is the founder of Cohere, as well as the EdUp Campus Planning podcast that I've listened to several of the episodes and are pretty good. Welcome to Bow Tie Tuesday.
Here I am, and sorry for the lack of I've got my special, very expensive clear bow tie that's imperceptible to the human eye.
It really is amazing.
Next gen technology.
Well, awesome, man. Last night I think you gave one of the keynotes to the event, and just being here, some of the ideas that are getting floated around. What's sticking out to you?
I think first of all, it's just great to talk. It's such a quick moving world. There really aren't that many people, if you think about it, who are front and center managing facilities, managing spaces, and just to get to talk to a bunch of people is great. So what I talked about was, as you saw, was the concept of does your space, do your facilities drive the mission of your university?
Yeah.
And my argument was oftentimes there's this detachment of space from the mission. There are a bunch of things pushing towards that. So I really just tried to talk about whether it's through data, through shared concepts, how we can move towards making sure, not just at the beginning, but through the operation of the building, through its life cycle, that it really drives the mission in a way that makes it worth the investment.
Yeah, I think, at least for me, space utilization or just other measures are definitely really present at the conference, right? And I think this is kind of the exciting new world we live in, which is, hey, there's not just measurement, but I think your point was, how do we take that also back to design?
Yeah.
And I think so much about, at least a lot of the kind of the architectural design type of panels or talks in the past, right, is presenting something beautiful, but then it also doesn't connect it to, did it actually achieve what we thought it was going to achieve?
Yeah.
And so I'm really interested in, how do we combine those worlds, right? Where it's not just design and we're designing hopefully beautiful things, but how are we making sure that we're actually achieving what we sought to achieve?
Yeah. No, and of course, design, beauty has its role. Design can help make a space welcoming, intuitive. But the question is, like you suggest, that doesn't happen by accident. It's got to be sort of rooted in something, including data, including this shared concepts. What do we mean by wellness? What do we mean exactly by inclusion? And so I think it's important to do that. I think the data stuff that you're working on is really important. I always say, and we were talking about this recently, that given how expensive it is to build a building, to operate a campus, there is gross underinvestment in the people and technology.
Yeah.
I would argue, and the ROI is just there. And yet a lot of facilities folks, granted, budgets are getting crunched in new and awful ways, but there still is that ROI. So I think that with the data, with those concepts, bring in design to some extent, and then you can have this building that does what it's supposed to do. But if we're not going to agree on what it's supposed to do, and to have our thoughts come from some data, not just impressions, then we're kind of not going to succeed. Now, the last thing I'll say is, on a campus, a big campus, you and I could have, let's say we worked at the library, we might have an impression of what's happening in that building.
Right.
But if you're talking 15 buildings, 500 buildings, you cannot just use your impressions.
Yeah. Well, so let me ask you this, right? With all these ideas floating, you're obviously in the space all the time, living, breathing it, you name it. When you think about a year from now, right, as you're consulting and helping other universities, what's maybe the top one or two things that it's like, hey, I know you've always done business like this.
Yeah.
We need to lean in here.
Yeah.
What is that for you?
So I think one topic that's been getting conversation, but it still is sticky, is shared office space, including for faculty. And I've got this upcoming workshop, and I think the title provisionally is going to be From Third Rail to Can't Fail. Because I get that faculty want their own office. In some cases, maybe it makes sense, but in reality, it's often just really wasted space.
Yeah.
And nowadays, with data, with shared understandings of, or rather new understandings of like space, we're just in a new era, and there are new incentives. And shared office space can be great. I think that's an area, but a lot of schools are kind of gun shy because how do you attack that? How do you, again, it's still a little third rail.
Right.
But if you look at the dollar benefit, especially if you're building a new building, right? It's one thing to not condense your existing office space. That itself is pretty egregious. Mm-hmm. But to build new, there's just a dollar cost there that's not tenable right now. So that's one. And there's a bunch of others, but for me, like one of my specialties is classroom planning. I used to be the director of scheduling and space management at Rutgers, so pretty intimate understanding of like the course schedule and how that might map onto the classroom stock. And also as we have more like experiential learning, online learning, where the LMS and VR, let's say, it's like, I think increasingly we need to compare our investments in physical space to investments in other realms, which theoretically CFOs and budget directors do, but I think we're about to enter a new phase of that.
Yeah, it's really, I think there's so many, I don't know if it's unwritten rules but there are just natural barriers for like how we've even maybe thought about like space, but even like the systems that we're using. Like for example, right, there's no such thing as a half credit course. Right. That would like break everybody's system. There's plenty of like you can actually make all these half credit courses, and then you might think about space totally differently. Yeah. Right. And I mean, just the world has changed from active design, learning classrooms to hybrid to you name it. And I think we're at a really interesting part where it's because the choices, let's say, have multiplied. Yeah. How do we get back to the function of what are we really trying to do with any of these spaces? And then to me, of course, how do we measure if that was successful or not? Right. But it's like, how do we remain agile over time instead of we built it and then we are just maintaining it? Yeah.
No, and we built it in the 50s and in the 17th century, et cetera. And so things like the semester academic credits, they have a function, right? They're not in the 10 Commandments or whatever foundational religious document somebody might care about. That being said, I mean, I will say students, let's say, moving through a course together in a semester has its benefits, studying together, and there are efficiencies, and bureaucracy has its very important role. But I think it's an urgent, not just a fair, but an urgent question. Do these structures help us? Can we tweak them? Even a little bit of tweaking. I think we have to ask those questions. And you see now like the emergence of 3-year degrees. And to me, if that's somebody looking to undercut higher ed, I don't like that. But if there's somebody saying, no, let's really ask the question, 90 credits versus 120, or maybe 90 plus some other things, whether it's prior learning, why would we not actively explore that? And I think that's what we have to do. And that's why these conferences are great. Bowtie Tuesdays are great, because we need to talk and talk and talk. For sure. And not get mired in the daily operations. Yeah, more creativity. I'm a fan. You should feel like you need to pump out some crazy ideas, every day. And some might be. I do have a lot. Sometimes I try to keep them under wraps before I expose them too much, but think them through a little bit more. But you're a fun guy to do that with. Awesome. This has been another Bowtie Tuesday. Chris, thank you so much for joining. All right. Appreciate your invisible bow tie. It looks great. Yeah. And we'll see you next week.